Welcome to Why We Are Christians. And today we're talking with Dee Virtue. She's up someplace in Washington, right, Dee?
That's right.
Very good. It's so good to have you on our program.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, an honor to be with you, Pastor Kent. Thank you for having me here, and all glory to God. It's a miracle that I'm saved. I did not expect this at all.
Been looking forward to this for some time, ever since I read about you in Christianity Today, the March issue, March 2022 issue, and I sent it out as broadly as I could, and I saved it and read it through, and we're going to try to cover a lot of what you had in that Christianity Today article. So Dee, where were you born and family and all that stuff?
I was born and raised in 1958 in Southern California, in North Hollywood, Burbank area, and my parents were Christian Science. What's interesting is that when my parents got married, my dad was actually a Presbyterian, conservative Presbyterian, and my mom was a Christian Scientist of the third generation, and the Presbyterian minister would not marry them because she was a Christian Scientist. And you would think that would have been a wake-up call, a red flag for my dad, for my mom, but no, they went and found another minister, and they got married, and my mom raised my brother and myself as Christian Scientists. We had to go to church twice a week, Wednesday night testimonial meeting, Sunday school, Christian Science church, and I was given a King James Bible as a very little girl and assigned readings in it every week that I had to read. Always out of context, always cherry-picked. Christian Science teaches, very much like the New Age today, that your thoughts create your reality, and that this is hard for me to say because this is blasphemy I'm about to say. Christian Science teaches that Jesus was a created mortal man who came to earth as a role model for us, as a teacher about how to heal ourselves physically. And I know a lot of Word of Faith and false churches still believe that, and it's very troubling because that messed me up completely. Mm-hmm. I didn't know the deity of Jesus at all. He was just a teacher to me. And when we'd read the passages in the Bible, we would skip Genesis 3, the fall of humanity. We would skip the crucifixion because that was negative. You know, you don't read anything negative. And Mary Baker Eddy, the inventor of Christian Science, she taught that the apostles who wrote the Gospels were illiterate fishermen who could not be trusted, and that it took her, and she would point to herself in the Bible, like the woman in Revelation, she said, and when Jesus said that he's going to send a comforter, which is the Holy Spirit, she said that was her. So just complete heresy and blasphemy, but I didn't know that growing up. All I knew was that I was having supernatural experiences. I was seeing things. I was seeing people that weren't there. I was seeing lights that I thought were angels. Just a really difficult, challenging childhood. And then later, I think to figure myself out, I went to Chapman University and I got a BA and an MA in psychology and became a psychotherapist. And while I was doing counseling with people, I would get intuition about them and things I couldn't have known. And it just kind of led to me becoming a New Age psychic. And I was teaching my clients Christian Science methodology and theology, and not calling it Christian Science, but just teaching them to think positive and use visualization and all these things I had used growing up. And so pretty soon began writing books that were basically Christian Science psychology books, and I got speaking gigs from that, and then that just led to me going on television. And pretty soon, after 20 years, I was the top-selling New Age author in the world, which I'm not proud of at all. But it's a testimony to God's glory, because for him to save someone like me, it's just a miracle.
Dee, now I want to back up a little bit because, see, you grew up in an area that I know well. What high school did you go to?
Well, actually, I grew up in Burbank and North Hollywood and went to Oxnard Street Elementary School and Craner Avenue and Washington Avenue. But we moved to Escondido when I was, I think, 11 or 12. So I ended up going to Orange Glen High School in Escondido.
Okay, well, I I graduated from Verdugo Hills High School in Sunland, Tahunga. I went to Glendale College.
Oh, my parents did too.
Is that right?
Yeah, both my parents went to Glendale College. Mm-hmm.
That's right. And so as soon as I heard Burbank.
Yeah. Yeah, I was born at St. Joe's there.
Did you have brothers and sisters, Dee?
Yeah, I have a younger brother, Ken, who married a Baptist woman. She married unequally yoked. And he was saved and got baptized about 20 years before I did. And he shared the gospel with me. I was terribly offended. They would talk about Jesus in a way that I didn't believe. I thought the New Age way, that Jesus was an ascended master, that he was the equal to Buddha and Krishna and Kuan Yin. That's what New Agers think. And I believed that Jesus was a wish granter. So when they would talk about Jesus dying for my sins, it would make me angry, because I was raised in Christian Science that Genesis 1:26, that we were made in the image and likeness of God, and then we skip over Genesis 3, that we're fallen now, and we would just say we're still in the image and likeness of God, therefore we're not sinful because God's not sinful. That's how I was raised, and that's what I believed and I was teaching in the New Age. So when my brother would say, you know, we're all sinners, it was like he was cussing at me. It was like he was telling me I was a bad person.
Well, you know, I can understand. I've experienced a little bit of that myself. There's a comparison here. Christian Science grew up in what I call the Occult Awakening, following the Second Great Awakening. But there was three others. There was Adventists. They've split now, the Adventists, but there was Jehovah's Witnesses, and there was also the Mormons. So you had Christian Science, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Advent. Today we're having another awakening. I call it the Occult Awakening. Everybody's going to it. Christianity is radically declining. From statistics I just read in Christianity Today, I think Tuesday of this week, and interest in the occult, the psychic, is growing radically. And so that's why we're putting all the attention on this, because people really don't know what it is. Like you didn't know what it was. Had no idea.
No, I thought I was doing God's work, because people would tell me that my teachings were comforting and helpful. So I thought, well, God must approve of it then.
Yeah, exactly, Dee. So then you were working as a therapist. Mm-hmm. By the way, my college background is also psychology. I was going to be a school psychologist, and I went into the ministry instead. But so you were working as a therapist. Where was that located? Where were you at?
That was in the Antelope Valley of California, Quartz Hill, Lancaster, Palmdale area.
Okay. Did you get married early?
Yes. Well, that's the thing, is that Christian Science doesn't have any purity teachings. And it was very legalistic in that you can't drink alcohol, you can't drink coffee, you can't smoke. You know, it was legalistic in that way. But on the other hand, it was eat, drink, and be merry. It was do what you want to do. So I would go to Christian Science events where there would be, you know, partying, and I got involved with, you know, boys and drugs and just kind of experimenting. A lot of it I know now was me looking for love in all the wrong places, but also, just like Eve in Genesis 3, I wanted that secret wisdom. I knew there must be some answers out there, and I would look in old books. I was just convinced that there was some answer that I could find somewhere.
Okay.
And it was in the Bible all along, but I didn't read the whole Bible. I'd read it out of context, and I just want to say, and this is going to offend some people, I had a King James Bible. That's what Christian Science uses. They're King James onlyists. And King James is a solid translation of the, 1611 of the, at that time, the oldest known manuscript. But it's hard to understand. And so I'd be reading it as a little kid with no theological background, no commentaries, except for the Christian Science commentaries. And I did not know what I was reading in this Old English. So, New King James, or I read the ESV now, or the NASB.
Okay, Dee, so do I. That's ESV, English Standard Version. I love it. That's what the Bible is in our pew. I forgot to say that I'm the pastor of Miller Avenue Baptist Church in Mill Valley. We're actually part of two different denominations, Southern and American Baptist, both, and we're glad for that. Although at one point I was a flaming charismatic Pentecostal, I have to admit it, during the 1970s.
Well, that was the time.
That was the time. So you graduated from Chapman. You're working as a therapist. And how is it that you began to be attracted to the psychic therapies? I imagine that word would fit with you, psychic therapies, because you were a therapist.
Yeah, you coined a new word. I was metaphysical more than New Age back then. What changed me a lot was that I started writing books about my case studies from psychology, and that attracted producers of events, particularly one called the Whole Life Expo, that was like a traveling circus of mind, body, spirit teachers. I was hired into that group, and we would be in a different city almost every other weekend. We came to San Francisco a lot. We traveled all throughout North America, and we would set up shop in a convention center, and it would be speakers like myself and very famous speakers. And there was also, on the convention room floor, there were booths that were selling New Age paraphernalia and accoutrements and methods. So there'd be body workers and yoga demonstrations and crystals galore and copper pyramids for sale, and you could get your chakras cleared. So in between the workshops, I would walk on that floor and go to these booths, and I'm just a researcher at heart. I now have boundaries and guardrails because of Jesus, because of the Bible. But at that time, I had no boundaries, so I would just teach me how to clear my chakras. Okay, now I'll learn how to do Reiki, and I became a Reiki master, and I just wanted to learn everything that I could. And then every time I would learn something, I would start teaching about it, and then I would write a book about it. And then pretty soon I had books on all these different New Age modalities, and it just kept going. I think by the time I was saved, I had 70 books and cards out there in 38 languages from a publisher called Hay House, Louise Hay's publishing house. And I'm not bragging about it. I wish I could get them off the market. The burden I have on me is other people continue to sell and use them, and I have no way to get them off the market because they're licensed out there. So the best I can do is go on this program and tell people these products will open doorways to demons, and do not use them, burn them, tear them up, pour water on them, get rid of them because they're not good.
In the article, what you say in big bold letters, please don't read my books anymore. Mm-hmm. Please don't read my books anymore. And I can understand the feeling, Dee, but it's out there. I understand a little bit, and nothing you can do about it. But I'm glad that Christianity Today made that in bold. Don't read my books anymore.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, Romans 8:28, God can use anything for good for those who love him according to his purpose. So what's good about this is people will write me every single day who are using those products, and they write me at Instagram, like your friend Roberta did, and I write them back and I share the gospel with them, and I give them a little free video of why I don't use cards anymore, why I recommend don't get into the New Age. And so there's been some fruit from that. Yeah. I've seen some people where at first they were offended, but we keep talking just like you do with people, and God's word does not return void.
Now, you said something just about 2 minutes ago I want to go back to. You mentioned the word demons. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about that.
Well, it's interesting. Jesus says that the devil is the father of lies, And we know the story of Lucifer, that he was prideful and that he was competing with God, basically, and that he fell. Depending on how you exegete Isaiah, I believe that when it talks about him falling, that it talks about a third of the angels going with him, the fallen angels, those are the demons. It's interesting also in 1 Kings, the Bible talks about lying spirits. And so I think demons and lying spirits are the same. In the Old Testament, it's usually called an unclean spirit. And in Acts 16:16, the girl who was the psychic before Paul kind of helped her, she had a python spirit within her. So there's all throughout the Bible people being oppressed by these unclean, lying, demonic spirits. And also what's a view here is 2 Corinthians 11:14, that Satan masquerades as an angel of light. And that's what happened to me. I really think that Satan and his demons prey upon people who are lonely, traumatized, who have been abused, and that certainly was the case with me. And I really thought that I was communicating and connecting with God's angels. But I didn't test them, as the Apostle John tells us to do in 1 John 4. And so these angels never confessed Jesus, as we're told to do. So they failed that test, but I didn't know it because I did not know the Bible.
When I did a second seminary degree, and my thesis was a manual of demonology and the occult. It was published by Zondervan in 1973. And the result was, for a decade, we had people showing up by the hundreds, and from other countries, because the book went in other languages, people who had been involved in Eastern religion, all kinds of weird stuff, a lot of occult practices. They came to have demons cast out of them. And I have to say that I've cast hundreds of demons out of hundreds of people. And Katie and I, we still do it. We do it by Zoom. And so I'm well aware that the occult, you know, when Jesus said, where two or three gathered together in my name, there am I in their midst. When you get a couple of people together and you're crystal gazing, you're doing your tarot cards, you're doing whatever, that somebody else is present. And it's not a good presence. It's a demonic presence. Yeah.
It sure is. And as soon as I was called out of the New Age, it happened when I read Deuteronomy 18, which is God speaking through Moses to the Israelites when they're about to go over the Jordan River into Canaan. And God says in Deuteronomy 18, particularly 10 through 13, don't be like the Canaanites. And he says, do not practice divination, do not practice mediumship, do not interpret omens. And this is what got me, Pastor Kent.
Deuteronomy 18, yes.
Yeah, God says, anyone who practices these methods is an abomination, is a detestable abomination to God. And it just broke me, because up until that very minute, I was convinced I was doing God's work.
Right.
And when I read that I was an abomination to God, that I was not the practices, the person doing these things is a detestable abomination, I was on my knees begging forgiveness, crying, saying I did not know. And it showed me, it humbled me though. It showed me I didn't know what I was doing and that I needed Jesus as my Lord and Savior. And that's when the spiritual warfare started. Up until that time, these demons were my, quote, best friends, because, you know, I was delivering their messages to people. And the messages, as I look back, they were horrible. They would point people away from church. They would tell people that the Bible had been corrupted, that Constantine changed it, that there was missing books and such. And I was telling people, don't listen to your Christian family. And it was horrible things. So then the demons turned on me when I renounced the New Age, and I started having awareness of spiritual warfare for the first time. And for me personally, I had bad experiences with deliverance ministries. You know, I didn't know you. I paid a lot of money to have this one guy with a cross, who's real famous, you know, try to cast out demons from me and other people, and it just made it worse. So here's what worked for me finally was I was reading Jesus in the Wilderness and how he dealt with Satan. It is written. It is written. And so I started, my husband was having this too, because we converted at the same time. We started playing audios of the Bible in the house. And for us, that's the only thing that has helped with spiritual warfare. Is every night as we're going to sleep, the Bible's playing. During the day, it's playing. And we're just listening to it nonstop. And it really has helped to calm our lives down.
Yes, I understand, Dee. It's a big deal.
Yeah, it was horrible for a while. I couldn't even sleep. The demons were just on me. I mean, it was palpable. I could just feel the evil.
Sure. Yeah, the evil is present, and it's and there's I have to say I don't know if you'd agree or not, but there exist certain kinds of deliverance ministries which are not really biblically oriented.
These were not. They were using formulaic prayers. If you say this prayer, you can rout out demons
I
such.
I am well aware of it, and I am a major opponent of that, and I know where that comes from.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I know where that emerges out of it. One of my books recent is False Prophets Among Us.
Mm-hmm.
And but the so-called deliverance ministry is nothing what it ought to be biblically. I know that when people like us talk about this, Dee, they can become afraid. They can become fearful.
Yes.
And they're going to start hearing the voices. They're going to start running into the spiritual roadblocks, and it can be a difficult road. Now, one thing I skipped over. I believe that you became a Christian about how many years ago?
It was about 5 years ago in
That's right.
About September or October of 2017. I did not write down the date. I wish I had, that I was on my
Yeah.
knees after Deuteronomy 18, but it was September or October. And then the next month we lived in Hawaii at that time. I should mention that as a New Age best-selling author, I had used all the techniques, the manifesting, law of attraction, visualization, vision boards, and it had worked. It had worked in terms of worldly success. I had, best-selling books, standing room only workshops, standing ovations. My husband and I had a 50-acre ranch in Hawaii, and I seemed to have it all materially, but I was still seeking. When I look back on those days, I'm like, I had everything you could want materially. And I thought I had good friends. Most of them have disappeared because they're still New Agers. But I had, health, good career, good marriage, everything. And I was still looking. It wasn't making me happy. So anyone who's ambitious, it's a word to the wise. Those things do not satisfy. They don't satiate. Only Jesus does.
You're exactly right, Dee. And today, the testimonies that you have are so vital because the occult mysticisms, the magic, the mediumship, the channeling, the Reiki, Akashic records, the Kundalini, the third eye, all of that stuff has an attraction, and people get into it, they get captivated by it, and it is a very dangerous practice.
It's
and
very dangerous.
Yeah, and
People don't even realize how dangerous it is. I mean, it wrecked my family that I was in the New Age. My poor sons are still in the New Age. I pray for them on my knees every day, but they're still deceived because I raised them that way.
Is that right? Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Dee.
It's tragic.
We'll remember to pray for them. Let me
Please
ask you
do.
this. About 5 years ago, you became real born-again Christian, and then did you go to start finding a church?
Oh, yeah, that's quite a story. Yeah. So I actually, what happened was in January 2015, because I was a universalist, meaning I thought that all paths led to heaven, I was always a student of world religion. And my mom, growing up as Christian Scientist, had always told my brother and I that we were Christians. So I always had identified myself, I'm a Christian. And I thought of born-again evangelicals as being narrow-minded, different kind of Christian than me. I always bragged that I was an open-minded Christian. who said that all religions were the same. We're all worshiping the same God with different languages. I was very much like Richard Rohr in that way. And so I would listen to Christian radio. I loved it. I listened to Chuck Smith in the 90s on Calvary Chapel radio. I listened to Alistair Begg all the time.
Alistair Begg, we love Alistair Begg.
We love, yes. So God used Alistair Begg, and then I would also listen to shamans, and I would listen to Tibetans and Buddhists and such, and I would listen to everybody. So, but on January, I think it was like the middle of the month, 2015, I was driving and listening to Alistair Begg as usual, and it was about 2 Timothy 4, at the end times people will want their itching ears tickled with false prophets. And he started describing what a false teacher was, and it was like he was describing me. And it was the first time I was ever convicted, because I was very narcissistic back then. I thought that every thought I had was from God. You know, I'd write these thoughts down and sell them in a book. But it convicted me that I was a false teacher. So that very day in January 2015, I went home after driving, and I said to Michael, I think we need to start going to church, and not a New Age church, but a real church. So in 2015, we started church shopping, and we tried everything. At first, we went to Seventh-day Adventist because I was attracted to, this is so silly, because I was a vegan in the New Age, so I thought, well, they're vegetarian. That was my litmus test. And then we got out of Seventh-day Adventist. We landed in a Foursquare Pentecostal church for probably maybe almost a year, and that was interesting, to say the least. But then where we finally landed for 2 years was an Episcopalian church, and we were attracted by the hospitality. I mean, Episcopalians are some of the world's nicest people. And that was what was important to us back then, and the inclusiveness and such. We liked that they said the table's open to everyone. It wasn't biblical. But we started really diving into Bible study on our own and there. And that's when I got to Deuteronomy 18. And at that point, that's when and that was the end of 2017. That's when I denounced publicly my work. And that's when I was fired by Hay House. In November 2017, they fired me. And so we moved from Hawaii, because we could no longer afford it after I got fired, to the Pacific Northwest with my parents, who we've been caring for since 2016. And then my husband had to go find a job, and I have a part-time job, and it's just been this scramble. But what it taught me, Pastor Kent, was how to trust God. I didn't trust God before then. I didn't know who God was. I was taught that he was an energy, a mind in Christian Science, and that he was far away, and he was not a person in my mind. So to learn who God was through Bible study and prayer and learning to trust him was mind and life-changing. It's just been amazing. Proverbs 3:5-6 are my life verse. And before that I thought I had to lean on myself, lean on my own understanding. I thought I had to get the answers through oracle cards, through pendulums, through crystals, through astrology, through psychic readings, through channeling and automatic writing. That's how I got my answers, but they all led me in the wrong direction.
They did. And Dee, you've got so much packed in. We're just about finished with this first program. We're going to come back. We've been talking with Dee Virtue, so we're going to be looking for more programs for Why We Are Christians. We're going to have Dee again. So long.